I often feel like I'm one of the few people who never got into Mr. Robot. I really tried with the show. I was never a Rami Malek fan. And thus, when I heard Sam Esmail was going to be making this film Leave the World Behind, I can't say I was excited about this because I have a few hot takes coming in. Two coming in real quick. First one is I'm not a big Sam Esmail fan from what I've seen. I just don't really care for his style. I've heard him on other shows and podcasts like The Big Picture, and I just don't care for him as the way he speaks about movies. I think he's a really insightful guy. I just don't like his vibe for whatever reason. So that was going against me going into this movie. And the second one, and this is a spicy take. Get ready for this. You're not ready for this take. Let me just say that you are not ready for what I'm about to say. I dislike Julia Roberts. I don't care about her as an actress. I just don't find her charming. I just don't understand why she was America's sweetheart for so long. There's never been a movie that I've seen that I just am like, oh my God, Julia Roberts is just outstanding in this. I think there's movies where she's certainly good. It's just for whatever reason, I've always had that disconnect with Julia Roberts. So going into Leave the World Behind, I was already pretty apprehensive, with also on top of it being a Netflix apocalypse movie. Just a lot of recipes for things that I just didn't care about. However, it does have a few things working in its favor. I like Ethan Hawke well enough, and I love Mahersha Ali, who is in this movie. And that was enough to get me, at the very least, excited, where it's just like, okay, you know what? At the very least, it has these elements in its favor. So I finally got the chance to see Leave the World Behind this today, actually. I saw it today, Wednesday, December 13th. And I'm actually glad I did because I have some thoughts on this movie, and this is going to be as best of a critical analysis as I can do on this movie without actually really writing down any thoughts. So I'm going to be kind of coming off the dome right here and trying to talk about it as best as I can without spoiling anything, because I think the spoiling of this movie wouldn't be fun. But essentially, it's this family. They go on this vacation in this remote part of New York, in the woods, and then some weird stuff starts happening. They start getting this weird eerie sense of something's not right, but they can't figure it out. All of a sudden, Mahershala Ali's character and the daughter character comes to their Airbnb. They're the ones who own the Airbnb, and they're like, okay, we have to stay here because of everything weird going on, of just we don't feel safe, and we kind of just have to bunker down here until we know what is happening. And that's the premise of this movie. Something weird is happening in New York, and they're not quite sure what. It kind of feels like cyber terrorism. It kind of feels like some sort of attack going on to the power grids. None of their internet's working. They're completely isolated in this town. They don't see anybody. And that's the premise of this. And let me just give off some phrases real quick. Mahershala Ali is a really good actor, and I think he conveys a lot of the emotion of this film well, because this film asks a lot of Mahershala Ali. Specifically, there he gives so many plot expositions in this movie where he just has to break down what is going on. A lot of the world of this movie, some of the conspiracy elements of it. Basically, he is our guide through this movie, and it's pretty thankless dialogue, and Mahershala Ali is doing the best he can delivering it. And I think it's a pretty heartfelt performance. I think he does a genuinely good job delivering some pretty sloppy dialogue. And that's how I felt a lot about this movie, Leave the World Behind. Was it sloppy? And I've heard a lot of comparisons to M. Night Shyamalan, and I think it's also particularly interesting because M. Night made Knock at the Cabin this year, which shares a lot of the same ideas in Leave the World Behind. I think they're both stories about isolation and just the disconnect. And I think the fact that I found the most interesting about Leave the World Behind is it kind of did show me how good M. Night is at intriguing and bringing the stakes of a movie alive. Because Knock at the Cabin, which is just essentially these, I think it's like eight characters standing in a cabin. And I find the thrills of that movie to be exciting and the stakes to be real. Leave the World Behind kind of promises this almost apocalyptic, world ending cyber terrorism attack. And I never felt the stakes of this movie. I just thought this film felt really small in value. And that's a real big issue for it, where it's just like we're talking about the end of the world, the end of America as we know it is allegedly the stakes of this movie, and yet I never felt that while watching the actual movie. And I think this is again, I just I'll say it. I thought Julia Roberts was fine in this movie. I don't think she added anything particularly special. Same with Ethan Hawke, an actor I like. I think their pulse was kind of that steady the entire movie, and they never really got me anxious in any way. And this story is all about anxiety and disconnect. And I just never really felt that while watching this movie. And I think it's also Sam Esmail's direction and writing, particularly. I think the direction is actually quite good. There's some really good scenes of tension in this film. Specifically, there's this set piece that involves animals, and there's this other set piece that involves cars. I found those two to be quite thrilling, and it's also maybe because they're the ones that don't really have any dialogue associated. There is some really good just moments like that throughout the film where you do feel that tension, and Sam Esmail is able to transcribe that tension through screen. The issue is when these characters start talking, it is a bunch of exposition. It's a bunch of just kind of mumbo jumbo ideas. It's Sam Esmail kind of almost writing a thesis statement of the disconnect, and the message of this film becomes quite clear right away. You start seeing where this film is going, and it starts giving you inklings at the beginning of, oh, this is what this story might be about, and this is might be what the allegory is. And by the time you piece that together, which is probably honestly by the end of the first act, you're like, okay, well, I know where this film's going, and it goes exactly where you expected to go. And that just wasn't really rewarding for me in any sense of the word. And that was my issue with this entire film. It's again, there are moments of genuine tension in here. There are some good performances. There are some well directed scenes from Sam Esmail. It's just the script completely falls apart in on itself, and it just doesn't have anything interesting to say. It becomes a apocalyptic movie to some degrees, or at least uses the genre of apocalypse and disaster movies, but to no real success. If I had to compare this to any M. Night Shyamalan movie, the one that actually kept coming on in my mind was The Happening. But to be honest, I found The Happening far more interesting. And Sam Esmail puts himself in the unfortunate position of, if you're going to make a movie like this, and this is the story you're going to tell, you should really edit some of this movie, because 2 hours and 21 minutes, this film really overstays its welcome, and it just doesn't get anywhere interesting. And it's so fascinating that by the end of this movie, that there are very specific political ideas, ones that might even feel very relevant. And it's fascinating the idea that Netflix would make this movie, but far more fascinating that Barack Obama's production company would be associated with this movie specifically for what the third act is saying. It's going to drive some conspiracy theorists crazy. What happens in this movie, and it's without getting that far into it. And there could have been a discussion on it, and it is really just the case of all of this, which could have been subtext within the film, and I think is trying to be subtext within the film. This commentary on Netflix, this commentary on politics, is just not there because this film just doesn't earn any of it. And it feels preachy without any form of impact. I found this movie to be quite annoying and quite frustrating, often, even if there are moments in there where I was invested in it. And I think that investment comes solely from Mahersha Ali and moments of the direction and tension. Everything else kind of fails this movie in a pretty spectacular way. And I cannot recommend Leave the World Behind. I'm giving this film 1.5 out of 4 stars here on the Beneverse Movie Channel. And I just want to say thank you all for watching this video. If you got this far, please do me a favor. And if you like this review, please make sure to like and subscribe to my channel for more videos and reviews to come.